Hey everybody, welcome back to the Titan Performance Podcast. It's me, one of your co-hosts. I'm going to call myself the co-host, Trent, former Air Force weather guy. I was actually talking about some weather nerd stuff with some folks at work today. A lot of good times, density of air and atmosphere. You guys don't want to know. It's crazy. But the host of the podcast, Mike Edwards, former Ranger Recon connoisseur. Does that even work, calling you a connoisseur? It just sounded fun to say.
I think it works. Speaking of the weather stuff, though, I had to know that stuff, man. As a free fall guy, military free fall parachutist, free fall jump master, all that stuff matters, especially altitude, density, altitude, and all that stuff coming into land canopies. When, like those pictures in the back there, that one right there, if you can see it, that's me in a hangar getting ready to jump over the Grand Canyon, and then that picture is on the drop zone in the Grand Canyon, or on the other side of the Grand Canyon. We flew all the way across the Grand Canyon and landed at that drop zone, which I think is about 7,500 feet above sea level. So density, altitude really matters when you're trying to land a canopy like that, especially when it's cold.
I know I speak for everybody who's watching the video right now that says, I couldn't hear anything over the sound of your biceps. You know, if you're not watching, Mike reached up and pointed behind him. Very much like, where's the gym vibes? I'm sorry.
Hey, it's a Titan Performance Podcast.
Yeah, I can't be serious.
Flex those muscles too.
So one of the things about performance, and I think this is something that we agree on, and it might not make sense to everybody else out there, but understanding the truth behind everything, right? I think your efficiency in performance, your efficiency in what you're doing in life, you're going to be much better at that if you understand objective reality. And I know guys like Matt Walsh like to talk about this stuff, understanding that there is an actual truth out there and seeking out the truth. And I think, we're obviously red-blooded, patriotic Americans, but I think if you don't know the truth behind things, if you don't understand how America works and what your responsibility is within that construct, then you might be moving out in the wrong direction, albeit, unknowingly, and thinking that you're doing a lot of good things when in reality you might not be, trudging the path of truth the way that you think you are. And so today I think Mike and I were going to talk about, just as an example, kind of Saddam Hussein, right? The Hitler of the Middle East for a time, even though right after the Gulf War they kind of eased back on some of that talk because we kind of liked him there. But kind of starting at the beginning, and Mike, I think you're just a little bit older than I am, but looking back at the Gulf War as a younger person, what were your impressions of what was happening and what kind of person Saddam Hussein was and his relationship with our government?
Yeah. Well, first off, before I say that, I would like to add to what you said too, just so people know out there, we're conservative Americans. We're not liberals. We don't believe in all that craziness. We fought for our countries for years and years and years. So we're not trying to beat up our country. We're just trying to expose people to the truth, because you can't, like Trent said, you can't perform properly if you're not aware of what the truth is. So yeah, Saddam Hussein, what I remember from him as a kid was during the first Gulf War. I remember my dad was in the army. My dad was like, man, we got to go fight against Saddam Hussein. And I was like, yeah, we're going to go beat this evil tyrant. Because all I knew was what I heard on the news, right? I mean, we heard that this guy was rattling sabers and he was getting ready to invade Kuwait and all these different things. And that we had to go over there as America, as the world's 911 call unit and defend Kuwait. So that's all I really knew. And then I knew everybody was tying yellow ribbons on everything. And then we had the shirts with a little yellow ribbon and all that kind of stuff to support the troops. But other than that, I really didn't know a whole lot more about it.
Yeah, and it kind of happened quick. I remember there was a little bit of, his military was large, but it kind of came out of nowhere, I think, for the general public. We didn't know about the relationship that we'd had with him before, or really the 10-year war that they had with Iran previous to the Kuwait invasion. I don't think that really made, at least not front page news in the United States. We are definitely like that, where it's if it's not affecting us directly, who cares if a couple countries I can't pronounce their names of are fighting for 10 years in the Middle East, and what America's role in that was, I think that was very, that was not visible to the majority of Americans.
Well, if we back it up even into the 70s, we had that Iran issue there, where there was the Iran hostage thing that happened, where, JSOC was created and formed out of the debacle that happened from that mission, where Rangers, Delta Force guys and all went in there to rescue those guys, and that, helicopters crashed and all that kind of stuff. And then we find out, like sometime before that, I think it was in the 60s even, the U.S. was kind of bolstering up, or maybe it was in the 70s, bolstering up Saddam Hussein. And actually, from the research that I've done, the U.S. with the CIA and also the Egyptian intelligence agency actually funded Saddam Hussein. And he actually had a handler that was a dentist from that was working for the agency and was also loyal to the Egyptian intelligence agency. And the United States supposedly funded, trained him, and backed him to help kick off a coup to throw out this guy. His name was what is it in my notes? General Abdul Karim Qasim. Right? They threw that guy, overthrew that dude. And basically, the United States, we installed Saddam Hussein years back in the day, way back before the first Gulf War.
Yeah. So for people that are not smart like me, it's like, why would we want a guy like Saddam Hussein to be installed in Iraq? There is some background here. I think you need to understand, like you said, like the history between the United States and Iran, which was not very pleasant, right? Like they had taken the guy that we had previously had a really good relationship that was running Iran back in the day, and they threw that dude out. They took our people out of the embassy. It didn't look good for us. The whole Jimmy Carter thing, as soon as he left, the Reagan administration, organized the release of the hostages to make Reagan look really good. And then we kind of held that grudge, and we didn't want Iran to grow and to perpetrate this idea that they could do whatever they want in the Middle East, sitting on top of all of the oil reserves, right? So there's all these things coming into play, and so it's like, I think if you don't know anything about it, and I'm not like an expert on Middle East politics and policy, but there are two big groups of different types of Muslims in Iraq, right? The Shias and the Sunnis. And Iraq was not created by the people in Iraq. Iraq was created by the Brits, and they drew these lines on the map, right, after World War I, and they said, you are a country now. And so it's always been kind of a tumultuous country in that way anyway, between the Shias and the Sunnis. I forget which one. I think the Iranians are the Sunnis or the Shia. Man, I
don't remember, to be honest with you.
But that was the worry, is that Iran was going to take over. So how do you stop a country like Iran from taking over Iraq and all of their oil, right? Like you install, or you support at the very least, a very crazy, strong, nationalistic person that is going to try to protect that border that was created by a European country. It's all kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it all, if you really dig into it, probably stems back to a lot of what we talked about last week, which is this Zionist movement, right? This Zionist movement is what established a nation state in Israel. That was established by the Brits as well through the Rothschilds and the Balfour Declaration. We stood up and created Israel. The United States is the military arm of Israel. You know what I mean? So we really are. So the United States, I believe, has been used to try to infiltrate any of these countries in that area where we think may be a threat to Israel. Because that's ultimately what we are here for. That's ultimately what the United States is here for. We have been here since the beginning to defend, not from the beginning, but in the modern times, to defend the nation state of Israel, this Zionist movement. That's why all the propaganda in the churches and all the propaganda by the politicians is all support Israel, man. We got to support Israel, man. That's God's people, man. And I'm saying it with my redneck voice because that's the way I hear it. When I hear these people say this absurdity, they say that those are God's people. We have to protect them. And so that's what I think this ultimately boils down to. We installed power there in Iran so that we had control there. They thwarted it and threw our dude out. So then we had to install power in Iraq, who was a rival with Iran, both of which had two of the biggest armies, I think, at the time, Iran and Iraq. So we went to Iraq and said, hey, this dude's got a huge army. Let's overthrow this guy who's probably loyal to Iran, and let's put somebody in there that hates Iran. And boom, there we have the rivalry. Yep.
Yeah, and then they start that 10-year war, which it ended up being a stalemate. And then coming out of that, so So we want that strong person in power, right? To protect that border, protect the oil, to do business with the United States. And then where he really messed up though was he invaded Kuwait. And even it's funny going back and reading the history, because as a kid it seemed like he crossed the border and we are in there, right? Like you have taken, you have this is a sovereign country and you invaded a sovereign country, right? Like, and the United States morally is against that. We're going back and reading like the transcripts and the interviews with the people in Washington. They were like, bro, if he just would have like taken some oil fields and stayed out of Kuwait City, we wouldn't have done anything, because we don't really care, because we like this dude. We'd already turned a blind eye, and we'd funded him and done all these other things. We'd given him weapons, like we all call them like dual use, right? And maybe like sent weapons to Egypt so that they could send their weapons that they had, like tanks, to Iraq. So it's weird that the Egyptians started showing up. Like, Egyptians were like good enough that we could like give them American tanks, and then all the tanks that they had, like their T series tanks that are Soviet, background, ended up in Iraq. Which, by the way, ended up being a not very good for them during the Gulf War, because our tanks were far superior. But the problem with a lot of stuff that you see on the news, and this is like a good example of it, right? Like, if you do a single step analysis, it's like, oh, like he's a bad guy and he invaded a country, and therefore America, and they appeal to our good nature and our sense of morality, right? And it's like, hey, we're the good guys after World War II. We're, all this other stuff. We must go in there, and we can rally the support of the populace to go in there and provide protection for this other country, when really that had not that much to do with the reasons for us going in there.
Yeah, man, and it's interesting too, the Egyptian connection. Even when I first came in the military, we were big time supporting Egypt. We were sending guys over there training Egypt all the time. There, like even the Ranger Regiment back in the day before I got there. Because once I got there, the GWAT had already kicked off and that stuff had shifted. But before the GWAT and the Ranger battalions, those dudes were deploying to Kuwait pretty regularly and doing, I think it was called Bright Star or something like that was the name of the training mission they did over there. But we were working with the Egyptians back then.
Yeah, and it's hard for people to remember too. Like, it's you just got to get beyond the headlines. And so our relationships, and there's levels of these relationships, right? Like, there's like the diplomatic level relationships, there's the intelligence level relationships, there's the military level relationships, and then whatever the actual upfront, because diplomatic or maybe like the diplomatic State Department type and intelligence stuff, and then there's the stuff you see on the news where it's like, yeah, Egyptians are our friends and they're good people and they're like democratic, whatever that means in a Middle Eastern country. But really, like, there's all these other reasons below the surface for us to either be supporting people, whether it's strictly a business thing and it's a money thing, or whether it's we have pull and access to their intelligence agencies, which in turn have access to like these other countries and areas that we need access to. And so it's almost an impossible ball of yarn to unravel, to see it all. But at the very least, we know that the story that we were told about the Gulf War and Saddam Hussein was not accurate. The idea that he developed chemical weapons on his own without our help, without us sending, like we sent. That I just want to read something real quick. The State Department also approved the shipment of 1.5 million atropine injectors for use against the effects of chemical weapons, but the Pentagon blocked the sale. The State Department sent like numerous shipments of like bacteria, fungi, and protozoa to the over there to make biological weapons, right, including anthrax. Like, you could make all this stuff from these things that we sent them as part of the package of like. Helicopters are dual use. You can use them for good, non-military reasons and for military reasons. But the people are guessing, like, these are people in Washington openly admitting, they're like, yeah, we think that that's how they created a lot of these biological weapons that they used on the Kurds that they dropped out of the helicopters that we gave them. Like, it's pretty cut and dry.
And the thing is, at the surface level, like you said, there were probably people that believed there was benevolent reasons for giving them that stuff. Oh, they're going to create vaccines and like kill people. No, it was never that way. At the intel, you're talking about the layers of it, the intelligence agency layers, they knew that was the purpose for it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of, like, what we have to realize when we look and analyze these topics is that all these intelligence agencies all work for one organization, and that's ultimately Israel. So they're all defending that. Here's another piece to the pie too. Think about this. What is between Iran, the biggest enemy of Israel, and Israel? What's between them? Iraq, smack dab in the middle. You know what I mean? So it's the perfect place to implant something, even if it's not like a physical or like a virtual shield or their Iron Dome, like they have their digital weaponry that can block everything. But now we have a physical army and an entire country that we support and back that's in between Israel and Iran, which is their biggest enemy. And the interesting thing is Iran is the biggest enemy that's going to destroy Israel in the end time, so the Bible says. So these people who plan this stuff are aware of what the Bible says, and they must believe that it's true, because the area of Shinar, I think is what it's called, in that eastern or western Iran portion, is where the destruction will come from on Jerusalem eventually. That's what the Bible says anyway.
And I'm guessing in the Bible, also not a biblical scholar here, it says Persians and not Iranians for people that may not be tracking. Iranians are very proud of being they are the Persians of modern day, and they have a very distinct attitude. Iranians have a very distinct, better than everybody else attitude based on their Persian heritage. If you've never met an Iranian before.
Yeah, and that's true. And their language still to this day is Persian Farsi, so. Yeah, or at least the main language in that area is Persian Farsi.
Yeah, and I think one of the things too is if you're an American and you view the Middle East and you think of it as a single entity, right? Like it's like, oh, like the Arabs, and it's like, well, when you start talking about like the differences in the languages, like we were in Afghanistan. And there were, like 3 or 4 different distinct groups of people, like large groups of people, within those even smaller groups of people. And you have all these languages. Like on my second deployment, we had to have multiple Terps because we were kind of on the edge of Nuristan and Pakistan. So we got Pashto and Nuristani, depending on where we were rolling to, that we would need a different interpreter for. And so, if all you do is watch CNN or Fox News and they want to paint everything in these broad strokes and treat you like you're a kindergartner, and if you never do any research on your own to understand how these things work, then you will perpetually be like missing almost everything that is close to truth and close to the intentions of your government. And this is, I'm going to throw in the disclaimer right now when we talk about our government, because this is always a thing. Like I've met people that work in all kinds of agencies and all kinds of departments in the military, and I think that there are some good people, even in the Secret Service. There's probably a few good eggs over there. Just kidding, Secret Service. You guys are just fun to make fun of because it's kind of a disaster. But when you talk about the overall, like the overseas CIA and all the other agencies that you've never heard of doing things that they're doing, and a lot of the agencies that you wouldn't think based on their name would be involved in these things, the results of a lot of things that they're doing might seem accidental, but I doubt it, because they keep happening over and over and over again. And Iraq is a really good example of how this works.
Yeah, it's not accidental. It's been planned for a long time. There are certain people way high up that know the full plan, and they're the ones orchestrating it all. But like you said, there are good people in the agency, in DIA, in the CIA, in the FBI, in all these organizations. There's good people within other aspects of our government too that are just trying to do the right thing, man. They believe in the system. Just like I did. I believed in the system for 20 some odd years. Like I told you, like before we came on the air, I didn't realize that I had been duped by our government until after I retired. It took me digging in and messing with some things and getting involved in other things. And I saw a lot of it while I was in. Don't get me wrong. I saw a lot of corruption while I was in, but it took until after I got out to like put it all together. So yeah, there's a lot of people in our government, in the military, and places like that. They're good people, man. They don't know better. They just believe the system, and they're trying to support it to the best of their ability. But the reason this goes on, and a lot of people don't realize, and you can attest to this, is everything in the government is compartmentalized, right? Even within like the special operations units, like what I was in, like there are programs that I was read onto that Delta Force dudes were not read onto. The SEAL Team 6 dudes were not read onto. But they have programs that they were read onto that I wasn't read onto, because it's all segmented and compartmentalized. And so this piece doesn't know what this piece is doing, or this piece of that piece, and it all works together, synchronized together. but you can't see the full big picture. Even the commanders who are read onto multiples of these programs still don't see the full picture because there's other commanders that have other programs that they're not read onto. So it's all just hiding the sausage, right? So all this stuff's being made and all these different war plans are being done, but nobody really sees the full agenda unless you're really way up at the top. And even some of the people way up at the top may not even see the full agenda.
Yeah, I don't know, Mike. When I got my top secret clearance, they called me to the Pentagon and they just showed me everything. That's how it works, right? You have a top secret clearance, you just get to see everything. It was really enlightening.
People think that. Yeah, they really do. I mean, people think that because we had a TSSCI or something like that, we know everything. You got the highest clearance. No, like there's special access programs within that you are read onto even within that. So
Yeah, I always love that. Hey, Trent, are aliens real? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, I wasn't part of that program, and I didn't have a need to know. And then, as a side note, too, when you talk about your government, the secret, top secret, the level that the way that they do a lot of the things is they
classify.
overclassify. Yeah, thank you. They overclassify like crazy, with the intent of keeping you from all this stuff. So you can put in a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request, but if they make something secret or top secret, you still can't see it all. And it's redacted. Like, it's amazing how many of the mundane things that you go through in the military, your day-to-day stuff, that it's like, no, this is secret. And that's just like in the military. And you're like, bro, why would this be secret? There are time-sensitive things, don't get me wrong. And they're very specific, like TTPs and stuff that you don't want released anytime soon. But man, like most of this stuff is simply, especially on the kinetic side, the vast majority of it is just time sensitive, right? Because we don't want them to understand our movements or where we're going to hit and the weapons that we're using. But man, 20 years later, it's still classified. Like,
Yeah.
bro, like, and they just keep all of it classified, and there's too much of it to sift through.
Yeah, and for example, like if I was overseas, right? Let's just say we're overseas right now, Trent, and you're in like Iraq and I'm in Afghanistan. For the people out there that don't know, if I was sending Trent an email from my work email, it would say at the bottom of it that it was classified secret, no foreign for 25 years. Every email, I could be like, Trent, hey dude, what's going on, bro? How's the pool up there in Balad or whatever? And like that's classified for 25 years, secret, no foreign. So that stuff cannot be spread out to anybody. And there are certain other emails you could classify them higher than that, but that was like the lowest level classification our emails could have. So yeah, it's all classified. I mean, everything. Like, and you're right. The Ranger Regiment's the worst about it, right? They overclassify everything. Like when you're on the phone, like, and I learned this in over the course of my career. You know, being in Line Ranger Battalion, it was like, you can't tell your parents where you're at. You can't even tell them what country you're in. I'm like, you would kind of think that they would assume that I'm in Iraq maybe or Afghanistan. I can't even tell them the country. Like, you couldn't tell them the country. You couldn't even tell them that you were deployed. Like, it was that strict. Like, oh, mom, I'm just grocery shopping for like 4 months. You know what I mean? Like, it's just dumb stuff like that. Like
Savannah is real easy to get lost in, Mom. Okay, I'm still lost in Savannah. There's a lot of Rangers here. It's kind of a good time, but like,
But that's the way it was. But then, as I did deployment after deployment after deployment, I worked in different smaller places and more decentralized locations, and I'm like hearing CIA dudes and Delta Force dudes and like SEAL Team 6 dudes talking on the phone. And they're like, yeah, we just went on a mission last night and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, wait a minute. How can they talk about that? It's because the Ranger Regiment over scared us so we would never say anything.
Yeah.
Because you thought you were going to get fired. But I'm seeing these dudes talking on the same phones as me back home, saying stuff that I never was taught that I could say. And I started testing the waters. I'm like, yeah, hey, I'm in Afghanistan. I'm actually in this area, you know, and nothing ever happened. It's because this stuff was never classified in the first place. So there are actual classification levels that are way overclassified. But then the vast majority of everything that's not even classified, you're told that it's classified. So you don't even talk about that.
yeah, there's entire internet systems that exist between secret and top secret that certain entities had to come up with just so that we could do our job, right? And kind of work in that gray area in between with read-ons, so that, because if you go to the TS, if you go to the TS side on the internet stuff that's over there, it's so restrictive that you can't even get any work done. But you can't work on the secret side because like I think it's not a secret that our secret stuff has been hacked and you know, the Chinese are in there. Everybody's in there. It's really not as secure as that they want to tell you it is. But I mean, and it's crazy. And then when you start like talking with like embassy people and state people, and then you start to see like the information that they just give out freely to foreign people, and especially people that are supposed to be our enemies or were our enemies yesterday. And it's like, okay, so this is all just a game. And then, and to your point, like in our community. So even when we started the One's Ready podcast as like an example of how crazy these communities can be, I was talking about my career field, right? Like the one that I left, like special recon and how we stood it up and all this other stuff. And I'm reading the capabilities out of the published standards that are on the internet. And I was getting phone calls from people saying like, you are giving away classified information on your podcast. Like that's the mindset of these folks, because they take so much on faith. And so like you take these people that take all this on faith, you're doing cool things, right? And it feels cool at the time. And whether you're an agency asset or you're in the military and you get to some of these levels and you don't have to go that high to feel really cool about what you're doing and how you're a secret squirrel. And then you take their good faith and you abuse it. So they can't talk about anything, and you can't start putting all these things together. They don't want to talk to their buddies about what happened, and it creates this black hole of an area. And if there's a black hole and there's no information getting out, it's super easy to do whatever you want within there.
Yeah, and for example, whenever it was probably 3 years ago, I got a call by a security guy who was like, "Hey, Mr. Edwards, I'm here to do the renewal for your security clearance, because I still to this day have a TSSCI clearance. I don't know how long that's going to last, because the people that are holding it, I don't think they're going to pay to hold it much longer, just because I don't use it. You know what I mean? I don't need it.
Yeah.
But I still have a TSSCI clearance, and this guy, and it got renewed because of this guy. So this guy calls me up saying, I got to renew your clearance, and I meet him down the road here at the local like gas station, like little eatery type deal in there. And we sit down, have an interview. We're talking. And then the question comes up towards the end. He's like, "Hey, what do you know about podcasts?" And I said, "Well, I've been on some podcasts. I mean, what specifically are you asking?" And he goes, "Well, okay, well, that's what I'm asking. You've been on some podcasts." He's like, "Have you disclosed any classified information, or have you broken any NDAs or anything like that?" And I was like, "Not that I know of." And then he finally disclosed the reason that he's there. He's like, "Well, actually, the reason I'm here is because somebody at the Ranger Regiment called them to have them revoke my security clearance because of what I was saying on podcasts." And I was like, "Well, I don't think I've broken any NDAs or anything like that, but here you go." And I texted the dude a link to like the 3 or 4 podcasts that I had done at the time. I was like, "Here you go." And he watched them all. So the security guy watched all of them and recommended that I keep my security clearance because I didn't violate one single thing after he looked into it. So that's the thing. Like, I was actually worried. I was like, maybe I did. I don't know. Like, I didn't think that I did. I tried to be pretty benign, but I didn't. Ultimately, I didn't. And that's the thing. And there's guys, like, we have friends. I'm not going to say any names on here, but I got buddies who are Delta Force buddies who just want to do stuff like this and tell the truth and come out on podcasts, but they're not allowed to, because those dudes still want to have fellowship with their unit. But the unit is so strict, man. That place is even more strict than the Ranger Regiment. And they're like, "Dude, if you say anything like that you were even in the unit and even acknowledge the unit exists, which can be found open source on the internet, they will blacklist you and you're not allowed to come back to unit functions."
Yeah, imagine spending 20 or 30 years building a family and earning your place in the hardest place on earth to earn your spot. You know what I mean? And to build this trust within this community. And then it's like your family, right? Imagine getting kicked out of your family because you go to school and you let a little dirt out about what actually happens at home, which everybody kind of knows about, right? There's no perfect family. Like, "Oh, my dad yelled at me yesterday," which is not a secret, but it's like, and then you get kicked out of it. The whole, like, if you think that the long live the brotherhood with the SEALs is restrictive, like, it only gets worse from there. And it's real easy for them to just disfellowship you. Like, but I'm different than you. I did want to say, when I was retiring, they called me up and they're like, "Hey, we could renew your TSSCI before you retire, and you can have it for a number of years, even if it's inactive. And then that way, if you get a TSSCI job, they can just reactivate it, and it's right there." And I was like, "No, I do not want a TSSCI when I go out into the civilian world. Like, I just don't want that stuff hanging over me. Because if you actually read the paperwork that comes along with having a clearance of that level, it's pretty insane. The rights that they have to delve into your life is pretty insane. Like, and I'm just not willing to do that anymore."
They can basically just execute you on the site.
Well, I mean, they can go through your stuff. I think they can come to your house, or like, like they can do all kinds of things. They can interview you whenever they want. And it's like just this other tool that they have holding over your head. So it's not just like the brotherhood. It's not just the family. It's not just you have access to the unit still. It is also like, for a lot of people, that is a good way to make money. There's a whole, section on the internet dedicated to, like, if you have a TSSCI, you can get a job. And it's not just military jobs, guys. Like, this is like Amazon, Google, all these
Yeah.
other things. And we will have to do another episode on, like, you think Google is not the same thing as our government and Amazon and all these other things that happen. Like, it's wild out there, y'all.
So Google, I've done work for Google. I've run some executive protection for their high-end big events. And dude, Google is a military industrial complex. It legitimately is. I mean, they facilitate backside infrastructure, internet and connectivity infrastructure for the internet or for the government, for the tier one special mission units and stuff like that. They're tied in there, and working with them, everything that they do is orchestrated like a military operation. I was blown away by it. I didn't realize that. I was like, wow. And I realized every single dude at a high level and staff there is a former military officer or high ranking enlisted dude.
Yeah. If you think you have the best version of Google Maps on your phone as a civilian, I promise you, you do not. They have some amazing stuff out there. You know what I mean? I don't think that's a secret, but yeah. So back to Saddam. So like, and also like as an example, right? So getting back to like how they play people against each other, which I find interesting that people are not tracking necessarily, is like the Sunni and the Shia Muslims, right? They go way back. They have a feud, but you want to keep these people at each other's throats, because instability is its own kind of stability, right? Like, if you can keep the people fighting, if this sounds familiar to America today, it's pretty crazy. If you can keep them fighting with each other, then they're not fighting the people above, right? There's levels to this game. And if you need an example of how this kind of works, remember in like Rwanda when the French were there back in the day, and they designated two different groups of people that were the same people in the middle of Africa. And then the French left, and these people committed genocide against the other people because the French back in the day had convinced them that they were all different because they looked a little bit different, right? So like, you want these people to be fighting each other. That way you're not fighting the imperialists or the government or the tyrants or all this other stuff. And so we want Iran to be over here with their version of Muslims and all this other stuff, and we want them to stay contained. And so you want Saddam Hussein over here as a strongman. But what was happening during the Iran war is it wasn't going well. Like, the Iranians were crazy. They were sending waves of humans at the Iraqis. Like, just tactically speaking, Iraq was going to lose the war, and that's really when. So like, we had done some supporting things and probably some intelligence things to make sure Saddam stayed in power. But that's when we really came through with like the weapons exchanges and the dual use stuff that we sent him, in order to make sure that we probably knew that he wasn't going to beat Iran, which was probably some of the goal, but we at the very least wanted to make sure that he didn't lose. And that's really when the U.S. went from just a strictly like probably an intelligence game to like straight up arming the dude that we claimed was Hitler just a number of years later.
Yeah. And that's a good point that you brought up, the instability. And that's what it's all about. And that's what these intelligence agencies do. They go into these countries, they find people that they can leverage as an asset, right? And then what they do is they leverage that asset as far as they can take it, build more assets off of it, and then ultimately they destabilize that country. And when they destabilize the country, one, like you said, everybody's fighting against each other. They're not worried about what's going on up and out. They're only worried about their local face. They're starving. They're looking for food. They ain't got water, no power. People are getting shot all the time. That keeps the people occupied and contained. Well, then they can always come in. They gave you ugly. They can come in and give you pretty. So they can find a dude who's backed by them, put that dude in who makes things great. Everybody loves him. The nation's now propped up, and that nation will do anything you ask them to do. They are now your bidder. So not only do they destabilize, they keep the people not focused on what actually is happening, but they also use it as a tool so they can prop that country back up if needed, to use it as a leverage, as a weapon against another country.
Yep. And then in Iraq, they have another unique thing is they have the Kurds, right? So if you come to a point where you want to kind of unite the Shia and the Sunni and show how good the government is with a common enemy, you can just go drop chemical weapons on the Kurds, which everybody in there hates. And you know, they're just a leech on your, whatever you call them, right? A leech on your country. They don't fit with us. They're some kind of weird Christian thing. They're not Muslims. And so I'm going to go drop chemical weapons on them. And the United States is going to pretend that it didn't happen for a long time until they're actually pressed and finally admitted that we knew about it. But like, so like there's all these little things that they can do. But we bailed Saddam out and we left him in power. And then he decided it's like one of the things he had to do just to maintain his status as a strong leader was he needed to chase some resources, right? Like, so the war with Iran had taken a lot out of Iraq. He didn't win. He didn't look good. So he's going to go into Kuwait. And I think everybody thinks, like, going back to to kind of what I said earlier, is as soon as he crossed the border, like we were in there. But like there's all these other things that probably happened in the background that you didn't see. Like the decision wasn't he invaded a sovereign country. The decision was a lot more than that. And I think that's where it gets real murky for me is like, what were all the reasons why all the excuses to go in there and take him out at that point? And also people forget, we liberated Kuwait. We did not depose Saddam the first time.
Yeah, and a lot of, at least what the media taught us, is that it was all about the oil, right? That's what they taught us. It's all about the oil. We got to protect the oil and stuff like that. But as you can see, we don't seem to care about the oil right now. It's in a completely destabilized state. That whole area is. So is that really the reason? Who knows? Probably not.
Yeah, and I want to read something here about that I brought up earlier from an ex-ambassador talking about Saddam. If he had pulled back to the Mutla Ridge overlooking Kuwait City, he'd still be there today. That's from an ex-United States ambassador. So like he just got too greedy. It became too big of a news story that we couldn't ignore anymore. And so we liberated Kuwait. And even after that, so after the Gulf War too, the rhetoric about Saddam Hussein, like we just didn't care. Like and that's a thing too. Is like we think that we get into like these morality wars, but that has nothing to do with it. We just wanted to look good. We probably wanted to test out. This is another thing. So we had a whole bunch of weapons that we hadn't tested out yet. And Saddam Hussein, crosses into Kuwait and keeps going. And it seemed like a good enough reason once he started getting to Kuwait City that we're like, bro, we have these like laser guided weapons now. We have this stealth technology,
cruise missiles,
right? Like, why wouldn't we? And of course, the folks that make all these things were probably like, hey, bro, this seems like a good time to empty out your reserves and buy some more and test all this stuff out. It's as cool as we said it was. This is a pretty decent test, but none of it is like none of it is the morality reasons that we're constantly fed. So yeah, I'm talking a lot. I get excited. You know me.
No, that's good. That's another huge piece to it that a lot of people don't realize is the money made from war, right? The military-industrial complex globally makes a lot of money off of war. And, they don't make any money when we still have munitions from Vietnam sitting in the stockpiles, which we still did up until Afghanistan, man. Like, no joke, Rangers and 3rd Ranger Battalion were firing mortar rounds from Vietnam, like just blowing this stuff out. Yeah. And they wanted us to do spindexes on that stuff. They were sending dudes like dropping tons of that stuff. Because, like you said, they want us to clean out the inventory so they can put that new stuff in there. And that new stuff comes from these military-industrial complex companies who have massive lobbyists who go to Capitol Hill and they take our politicians out to these. I've been to these events, so I've been there, to these big black tie events where these politicians are all in there drinking, eating good food. There's prostitutes running around. I'm talking high-end prostitutes running around that you wouldn't recognize as prostitutes. Call girls, essentially. And they're in a lot of money. And they're like, hey, Trent, here's $150,000. Here's, $500,000. Here's $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever the number is. They know the number. They've planned this all out. It's a strategic thing from them. And they buy politicians. And they buy, and like, for example, let's say one company, I'm not going to say the names of companies just because we don't want them coming after us necessarily, but let's just say one military industrial complex company can buy, 40 politicians. Well, this other one spends enough money to buy 75 or 100 politicians. They're probably going to get the vote because these votes do happen, but these votes are paid for with money. So that ultimately leads to war. So these companies will get our government to buy and fill the stockpiles up, but then they'll also push our governments to go to war because they want to make more money and send the stuff overseas. And mind you, just so you guys know, our military industrial complex companies fund both sides of every war. They were funding our enemy during the GWAT as well, in covert means and covert methods that we can't see. You have to really pay attention to dig into it. They're funding the attacks on Israel right now. We were basically funding Ukraine, yet while also funding Russia. I mean, our government is sneaky, and they've gotten sneakier and sneakier about it. But our government and the military industrial complexes that are associated with our government fund the both sides of every single war that there is.
Yeah, and if you want to see the small scale of that, so y'all have heard of SHOT Show. I went once, and I don't think I'm ever going to go back. I felt super dirty afterwards, but like it's just like you said, the amount of money in this stuff, and the weapons and the gear and all this other stuff for the military. And SHOT Show is really tame compared to like the bigger ones where they get together. And the military all has their own things too. Like the Air Force straight up has like an Air Force, it's called AFA. And I went to one of those too. And it's all these companies that pay to be like, to have their name on the sign, and they whining and dining all these Air Force generals. And it's like, look at this new great technology that we have. We're going to solve all your problems. Like we straight up embrace these corporations. Like, and it's hard to say that we shouldn't, because like some of this stuff is really helpful. Like if you believe in a war and you're a soldier, or somebody on the ground, like it's nice to have the better equipment. Don't get me wrong. But like it's so out in the open that way, and the amount of money is insane, you know. So yeah, if you ever go to SHOT Show, open up your eyes, look around. It's yeah, it wasn't my favorite thing.
Well, and like you said, we as soldiers, because I've been there, you've been there. Like I want the best night vision. I want the best rifle. I want the best ammo. When you're in there and you're fighting the fight and you believe in the fight, you want that, right? Because you don't want to die. You want to have better equipment so that you can beat the enemy. But then once you step away from that, like for me, it took retiring and step away from that and then get involved and see other corruptions. Then you can kind of start seeing how it all really works together. And ultimately, when you dig into it, all these wars, we talked about it last week, but all these wars are contrived. And they're contrived to make money, to destabilize regions so that we can then later prop them up. They're all chess pieces. All these countries and all this stuff is chess pieces that are moved by people that we don't even know who are playing the chess game.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of things too. I think we learned a lot of valuable lessons after World War I as like the ruling elite, right? Whether you believe in that type of thing or not. It's like if you take a country like France that used to be like a strong, proud country, and you wipe out all of the 18 to 29-year-olds within that country, like turning that country into a very malleable country over the next 50, 60, 100 years is very easy to do. You know, the same thing happened with England. You know, you look at England after World War II, and they had like their little post-war recovery, but the type of man that exists in England is probably not the same overall, right? I'm speaking in generalities. I don't need the really awesome British dudes to come after me. SAS bros, I see you. You're great. Not you. But you know what I mean? Like just overall, just like you wipe out an entire generation of young men, or at the very least you break a whole bunch of young men. I think that's something that we don't really think about. But if I was an evil person that could like kind of move things around, I want all of the young men, instead of sitting around researching their own government and their own power within their community to make change and to keep people free, and respected the rights of individuals, I would suck them into the system. I would give them what they want, and so like I am always conflicted about telling people they should join the military because it's a really good experience, but like also like you kind of get co-opted into the system and thinking it's all great, and then they're like thinking the government's a good thing. But also like you give the young men what they want, like that rite of passage that, we all seek, that, am I a man type experience, but it does a lot of harm to the people that should be keeping their governments in check.
That's another really good point that you bring up there, and I never even looked at it from that angle, but that's a very good point, because especially like World War II, a lot of people died. A lot of men died. Vietnam, a lot of men died. And ultimately, that was back in the beginning. They destabilized, even the populations in that way, throwing off the balance between men and women. And that ties us to another biblical concept, which we see is going on in our nation, is the demasculinization of men, like the real masculinization of men. Not this toxic masculinity bullcrap that people get pissed off about, like who cares, whatever. But I mean legitimate men. Men are supposed to be in charge of their own homes. They're supposed to be taking charge of their families, like we talked about a little bit off camera. And if you wipe out a vast majority of a certain age group of men, there's a lot less men to do that. So these men, the few men that are left, are going to be super occupied trying to, figure things out. Not to mention, they're all going to get consumed right up. There's not going to be any men out there free thinking. They're all going to be married. They're all going to be having kids, because there's tons of single women out there because all the men have been wiped out. And it's another way that they can take the men's eye off of the game, I should say, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Well, and I know it's a little bit off topic, and we'll get back to Saddam a little bit, but like, you also have to look at the media side of it, right? Like the psyop. How does the media, for a lot of years, how did they portray the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan?
I mean, it was always in a pretty good light.
Yeah, it was good, but also like there's so much PTSD talk. The
True.
broken veteran. I remember that there's this movie called Stop Loss, right? And it was a terrible movie, but it really and they lean into like the broken veteran thing. And if you look at like the majority of all the stuff out there, and we talked about the media a little bit last week too. If you come back from war and you're struggling with some stuff, and all you see is like you have all these support groups, and it's like you all have PTSD, and it's like, and then it's just like all these veterans are alcoholics, and they all get these drugs, and it's like it's easy to fall into like some of that stuff. Like, am I broken? Do I have PTSD? Am I, do I have all these issues? Should I go seek medical attention if I have these problems? And it just leads to all these terrible outcomes. I think one of the worst things that happens is they do say really nice things to you when you come home, but on the back end, the media is telling you that if you went to war and you actually saw combat, or even if you didn't see combat, there's like this status symbol to having PTSD now, right? And everybody that went over there is supposed to have PTSD. And so it just reinforces that that nonsense that you're not going to come home and be a strong individual person anymore. You are broken because you went to war.
Yeah.
And if they tell you that enough times, enough of those people believe it, and then you do end up, maybe not all the people died, right? Because we didn't really lose that many people in GWAT, but you have a broken generation of people that think that they are not capable of leading their family and doing all those other things, and it breaks up families, and it causes all these other issues.
Well, yeah, and it's the propaganda feeds over to the women as well. Like, for example, like my wife and some other wives too, I think sometimes they probably push the PTSD and the war damage thing too much. Mm-hmm. And like, dude, don't get angry because I'm trying to enforce rules around here. That's not PTSD. That's just me being the man of the house, right? Sometimes I think, but it's not a ding on them. They have been indoctrinated to believe that way. Just like you said, we've been indoctrinated to believe that way too, which diminishes us as men. We're like, oh, can I still do it? Can I still perform? Can I do the right things? Am I messed up in the head? You know what I mean? And you start questioning these things, and then when they come at you, oh, you're messed up in the head. You've got PTSD. You shouldn't be the father of this house. You shouldn't be enforcing rules. I'm like, wait a minute, should I not? It makes you doubt. Yeah. So it tears down the family unit again in another way. I never even thought about that, but that's a good point.
It always drove me nuts, because like I'm a big, like there's definitely some dudes that have problems, but like for the vast majority, I think of the guys, especially that like, worked at a higher level or worked really hard to be where they were, or were like a really good infantryman, most of those folks can come back stronger from the event. For the experience, but they're always bombarded by all this stuff, and like so the victim vet mentality that I think most people can overcome. That's one of the things that I talk about a lot. It's like you can overcome it. You did all these other things. Don't let them convince you that you are less than or you are broken, and keep you from the rest of your life potential. If you do 20 years, you're like, what? I was 41 when I retired from the military. You're telling me for the next 40 to 50 years, I'm just a broken person that can't do anything, that can't be involved in my community, that I'm, that I should just sit around in my couch and drink and just enjoy my retirement. Like it's all nonsense. And these are just traps that people can fall into. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a totally good point. I never really thought about that, but when we dive into this stuff and start talking about it, you realize there's a lot of second and third order effects that, we didn't even consider, that I didn't even consider, at that, back in the day. But when you look at it from a holistic spectrum and you look at the whole thing and just try to put all the pieces together, it makes a lot of sense. And for the people out there, we're harping on performance, right? This is a Tied to Performance podcast. And this does tie to performance. If you don't understand this, you're going to be operating in a battle space in which you don't understand. And how can you perform better? Like in the military, like I tell people preaching the Bible, we have to know our enemy. If I don't know what Satan is about and capable of, how can I defeat him? How do I stand a chance? It's the same with this. with everything that we do, there's an enemy, there's an adversary, there's an opponent, whatever you want to call it, out there. If we're trying to perform and outperform someone else or outperform this person, we need to know the battle space or the arena, whatever you want to call it, in which we're operating in. And that's what we're talking about today. This full spectrum of how this world is established, what actually backs it up, what you're getting into when you join the military and things like that. Because like you said, I don't encourage guys necessarily to join the military anymore. But if they're hardcore about it and they feel like they're called to, I support it, and I tell them the truth, like what we're talking about today. But then I also try to give them the tips and techniques that I can to help them survive it while they're in, just from the knowledge that I have from having been in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things too. It's like the multi-level analysis. Like two things can be true at the same time. I think joining the military as a young man is a wholly positive experience, especially for the type that needs that. You know, I think I needed that. But also, if you don't go into it with your eyes open, there are a lot of traps that you can fall into and a lot of lies that you can believe about yourself and about what it is that you are actually doing. And as long as you keep focused on the right thing, which is like your personal development, protecting the guys next to you, like there's nothing wrong with that. Being in that situation, like your country asked you to, all we are is the last step in the diplomatic process. And if we actually do have a democratic republic, then we're just performing the will of the people, right? But that's a whole other conversation about people's personal responsibility for the way things are versus screaming about a boogeyman. I do want to talk about Saddam a little bit. So it's funny. I think people are going to get upset if we don't finish this out, and keep talking about it. So like we win the Gulf War. The military-industrial complex is happy. Like we proved all this stuff. CNN, for definitely not in bed with intelligence organizations or helped in any way, has all this great footage of everything that we did. And so like the American, morale skyrockets. We defeated like the fourth biggest army or whatever in the world in a matter of 100 days. It was amazing. And but after that, after we liberate Kuwait, there was a question, and everyone would think like, well, you told us Saddam Hussein is Hitler. He's the worst person ever. He's gassing his own people. He's very much like an Assad type character that we play up in the media. Why didn't we get rid of him when we had the chance?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. And I think the way I can see it is it probably just we needed him still there to thwart Iran, essentially, a strong power there to keep a little bit of stability there, because at that point in time they probably wanted stability there. And then later on, the people that planned that, I'm sure planned what we fought in the later invasion of Iraq. And a lot of people like to say that there was no weapons of mass destruction there, because there was these false precepts that we went in. I don't believe that necessarily, because I've personally opened bunkers with explosives, by the way, that had like gas and all kinds of sarin gas and all kinds of horrible stuff in it. So that stuff was there. Never found any nukes or anything like that. But at the beginning of the war, we called that stuff that was there, we called gas, weapons of gas, what was it called? Like chemical weapons. Yeah. We called chemical weapons. Those were classified as weapons of mass destruction. And there was tons of them there. Tons of stockpiles. A lot of them in U.S. military cases, too, by the way. So
crazy. I don't know how that happens. So according to like the official people that actually went on record afterwards, like there was a few things that happened. Bill Clinton got elected, which was a terrible decision by America. Just so you know, we should all look at ourselves in the mirror and wonder how that happened. But like they did try to oust Saddam a couple times. There was the thing where Saddam Hussein hired some Kuwaitis to try to assassinate the first George Bush president. Like some shenanigans happened, and we did some like half-hearted things. I think the Clinton administration lobbed a couple cruise missiles into Iraq, killed one of his mistresses, that type of stuff. But they had a question, right? And then this is actually like, I kind of applaud them for this in a certain way. Like, so the policymakers that maybe weren't, invested one way or the other, they were like, well, what do we do if we get rid of them? Like, what happens then? And I think that's a question that was maybe the smartest question that was asked during that time period. But I'm not saying anything that great about the Clinton administration, especially considering some of the tight spots he put our forces in like Somalia and those other places, famously. But it just shows that we didn't actually care about Saddam Hussein. We didn't call him Hitler anymore. We used him as kind of a boogeyman every once in a while to like spin up the military and do a few different things. But when you're at a certain level in the government, and I like to use this example, so like when I was like a MAGCOM functional manager, it doesn't mean anything. You're just higher up, and I was working like assignments on people, and I try to explain to people, Like my boys would call me and they're like, I really want this next assignment. I'm like, bro, at a certain point, it's just math. Like I can't give every individual person exactly what they want based on the system. Like it's math. I have these bases, I have these positions, I have to move people, and I can't care about you as an individual. Like I'm too high up the chain to. I'll help you if I can, but like I can't make any promises. Imagine being 1,000 levels above that. Like you think that like the reasons that they give you on the news, I'm telling you, are straight horse manure. Like they don't care about people. They don't view people as people anymore. There are there are objectives that they have that are well beyond the realm of anything that has to do with your humanity or morality or anything. It's economics, it's power, it's all these little side deals that they have with everybody else. It has nothing to do with them valuing human life or your life at all.
And there is another piece to it that we haven't talked about. This is probably a good piece to a lot of this stuff, and not specifically Saddam Hussein, but these wars do bolster our economy. So it helps us. Like America became wealthy off of fighting a lot of these wars because it brings a lot of funding into the United States. So there is that good aspect. And like you were saying, these politicians, and not just the politicians, but policymakers at a higher level, the good ones that we talk about, they're looking at it from those angles. They're like, well, this is going to help our economy. You know, I want my president that I'm associated with to look good in the polls. You know what I mean? So there is that aspect to it as well. So it's not just the evil and wickedness. Not all people are evil and wicked. There's a lot of that out there. And our government is definitely corrupt. And there are a lot of people that know that they're doing wrong there. But there are a lot of good people too that are just trying to make America better, you know, make America great again, whatever you want to call it. But there are people that are trying to do that. They love this country. They want to defend this country. And if they're not out there fighting it, they want to try to push policies that they think are beneficial. Sometimes they're pushing policies that they've been deceived to think are beneficial. But in certain cases, these things can be beneficial, like I said, financially, economically, and things like that for American people and our economy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know we're coming up on time, but like when we talk about a few things, I do want people to do their own research, right? Like, don't listen to me. I'm just a guy that did 20 years. You know, I saw a lot of stuff, and I have my own opinions, and they're very, very strong opinions. They're attached to my ego and all these other things. But like, when you're looking at the government, and I think people are getting better about this. So there's good news. I think the latest generation is having their eyes open a little bit, but there are traps that I see, right? So like, I know you like to talk about Israel a lot, but I always come back to like, they would not have the power if our politicians and the corporations and all the people up there that are trying to keep everybody else from having any power did not make those deals, did not play ball, did not do any of those other things. And I would love to be able to buy into like the boogeyman stuff. So this is like Trent's personal opinion, but if we do not own our country as men, as individuals, if we cannot see the truth and if we cannot make the changes that are required. And I think in a lot of ways, talking to guys like Mike is super inspirational in this way, in the way that you're just so like, and I'm not trying to blow smoke, but like the how brave you are in just saying exactly what the truth is as you perceive it. If we're not all willing to do that as Americans, we're not going to, you know, get our country back. We're not going to own our country. We're not going to be able to break ties with other countries and intelligence organizations that don't have our best interests at heart. And so I think that's really what I'm trying to get to. That's why the performance aspect is so important. Because like if you're not physically, spiritually, emotionally, and all these things fit, it's really hard. We were talking about this a little bit before the podcast. I'm trying to get myself right again spiritually, right? It's a lot harder to stand out there on your principles and to you know push for the things that you should be pushing for.
Yeah, and like Trent said, dig into it. One thing you might want to look into first is look into the political funding from Israel to all of our politicians, Republican and Democrat. Both sides are taking tons of money from Israel. So just look into that. But yeah, dig into this stuff yourself and speak out about it. As an American, speak out about this stuff. Speak the truth. Find out and know for yourself so that you can speak confidently on this truth. That's the key.
Yep. And one last thing I promise is if I don't care if you're Christian or not or a C.S. Lewis fan or not, but if you've never read the Screw Tape Letters, right? So there's like the Mike's thing, like you need to know what's happening right now, and on the theoretical side, like how to manipulate people to do bad things while thinking they're doing good. If you've never read the Screw Tape Letters, I can't recommend it enough. It will kind of set the stage for how dark powers would go about getting you to do certain things. So. Yeah, Mike. Anything else for this one?
No, man, that's all I got. I think it was a good one.
Yeah, so join us next week. So we're going to try to tie a lot of the performance stuff to things like this, but also bring guests on. Obviously, we're not like anti-military or anti our experiences. There's a lot of things that are true at the same time. So bear with us as we kind of unroll all these balls of yarn. But like, just obviously, our interest is your performance, making America the best version it can be, and the best way to do that is you being the best version of yourself that you can possibly be. And we appreciate you all listening.
Yeah, you need to know the truth too, to perform the best.
The truth is out there. Also a great TV series. There was a lot of truth in that. It's crazy. All right. Later, y'all.